At 10 o'clock news, the government issues its air travel scorecard for October, and San Francisco Airport gets a big F.
And someone has sabotaged the latest experiment with a man-made life form. Those stories when Dennis and I come back.
These people, they're mad scientists. They really are.
And I guess we just drove back. Now, I got out there, and I also wasn't expecting that the plants were pulled up. I didn't know. Oh, I guess I did. Yeah, that's right. I'd gotten one or two messages at the end of that night of listening to the answer machine where they said something very cryptic about having done it or something. And I had no idea. So it turns out that what happened was, instead of doing the candlelight vigil, is that these three groups of people, these three groups of about 4, 5, 6 people each, went out there in 3 separate cars. And the first group went out there, and they had no idea where the test site was. And so the driver just dropped them off at one place. And they stayed hidden in the ground, low to the ground, and then that person headed off, and I guess got freaked out and drove all the way back to Berkeley, an hour away, and then the other 2 cars met in a parking lot at McDonald's in Brentwood, and so they kind of pulled up, headlight to headlight, and then instantly these 2 cop cars blocked them off behind them, and pulled out all of those people. And said, "Oh, we've been expecting you." They get on the radio, blah, 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 blah. Well, what they did was they called the guards that were at the test site. And they were now expecting us to be there. I don't know why they thought we were going to do something the night before. We'd never done I'm credited with inventing anti-GMO ecotage. So it hadn't happened before. It's not like, have a logging operation up here and they expect the earth firsters to show up and destroy their bulldozer or climb in the trees or blockade a road. So the test site guys turned on these big spotlights to look for the earth firsters who would be crawling around or messing with their site. And that pointed out to the earth firsters where the site was. And they just waited for them to turn the light out. And then they went walking, crawling, whatever, like a mile to the test site, and they got on their bellies and with one hand on a row of plants just went through and started pulling all of the plants, and they got about 90% of the 2,400 plants all pulled up. And then they headed out of there. Well, what happened was at the parking lot, there was a guy there, I think he was a student from, I don't know, India, something like that, and he didn't have ID, or he didn't want his ID to be seen. And my memory's fading on it now, but I guess maybe that was why they called up. But anyway, the cops, after checking these people, escorted them out of town. But they only had one cop car that followed these 2 cars. So when the cars got to the road running around the perimeter of the town, they split. It was a T intersection, so one car went to the left and one car went to the right, and so the cops could only follow one car. Well, the other car then doubled back, and they didn't know where the test site was, but when they went to where the first group had been dropped off, the first group had gotten out, and they happened to run across each other, and so they crowded like 12 people into this car, because the first vehicle had gone back to the long haul, I guess, and they headed out of town. So I was not a part of that crew that went out there, although that's the other thing that was weird. It was my idea. I wanted to do it, but nobody else wanted to do it. Nobody else wanted to do it. They just, I don't know, I guess, well, property destruction is something you have to get over again. It is okay to bankrupt Monsanto. It is okay to bankrupt Monsanto. It is okay to bankrupt Monsanto. You don't want to work towards saving the jobs of the Monsanto workers. We'll find them other work, restoring the ecosystem, doing organic farming. There's plenty of labor in organic farming. But you got to have permission to do that. You got to have permission, like when you're running for office, you got to have permission in your mind to defeat that other person. It's the guy I've been running against is a nice guy. One of the Republicans a total jerk. But, Jared Huffman is not an evil person.
Mr. Chair, I think this is a terrific amendment. In fact, if anything, I would go one step further. I think we may want to consider going big with this Reagan naming enthusiasm and just naming the planet. We've already talked about a huge part of the ocean, bigger than the United States itself, and we're sort of piecemealing our way with mountains and other things. But I'm beginning to see some possibility in this. If we went that natural next step and named the planet Reagan, I think that might be the breakthrough we've been looking for.
It's I don't know. It's something that I had to deal with initially. I feel fine about costing him his job. In fact, I might even hire him to be my chief of staff. So, he'll have a job. So anyway, no one else was going to do the sabotage. In fact, when I was going to get back from the court case and meet with them at the Long Hall, we were going to decide what we were going to do, and I knew I was going to try to encourage people to do that. I think maybe we had thought, well, we'll talk about whether we're going to do something like that. It's like they really wanted to see us lose every other way before deciding to do that, because people didn't really want to do it. And again, we had no idea what jail sentences or fines or whatever we would have, and we were all, poor people. By the way, I'm doing a lot of kick-ass activism today, and I definitely need the funds for it. It's coming out of my food money. So you can go to that. Oh, here it is. The PayPal. PayPal.me/Andy Caffrey. And if you could put something in there, that would be really nice. Because there's a lot of work I've done that I've not been able to do. In fact, because I didn't have any support for it, the Frostban campaign didn't expand after 1987. In fact, David Brower... that was amazing, too. David Brower, my biggest hero, he saw me as a hero, and he invited me over to his house for his famous strawberry waffle breakfast. And his wife, who had been an editor at University of California Press, that's where she met David, she said to me, I've only made this offer once before. But if you put together a newsletter, I would be willing to edit it for you. So she offered to edit only to me and to David Brower. Well, no support to make anything happen. No resources, no other people who wanted to do the activism. We even started a name, Genetic Alert. That's why it said Genetic Alert in there. There wasn't really a Genetic Alert yet. That was going to be what we were going to do afterward. So anyway, our ice sheets are collapsing. In 1998, I was the only person in the world who saw that global warming was speeding up the collapse of West Antarctic ice sheet much, much faster. And then in 2014, NASA, JPL, announced that the collapse of the West Antarctic ice sheet is now unstoppable. 20 feet of sea level rise is now unstoppable. I want to get the word out that we have to get our nuclear power plants shut down now. We have to start decommissioning now because they take decades. So I'm putting together a video, a national security threat from polar ice sheet collapse presentation, as if the Pentagon or the UN had asked me to make it. And I'm going to take that video around the country and lend support to the local activist groups there. So that's what I'd like to do. I also have $170 in internet expenses every month because I live in a very rural place, and in order to get a signal to you that is not all broken up, that's what I have to spend. So I have one of those bills due in a week. So I could really use your help this week, and it is my birthday. I'm 61 today, so that would be totally, totally cool if you did that. And anyway, in a general sense, if you care about issues, you really should look to make sure they're supported, because here's the other interesting thing is that, we bankrupted the company, and then all those 30-some-odd tests that were supposed to happen, none of them happened. None. So in the 1990s, apparently what our action did had really inspired anti-GMO activists in Europe, in India, and Africa. And that's why in 2002, the BBC considered me a world historic figure, because what we had done had inspired thousands of activists around the country to do these kinds of direct actions, crop disruptions, whatever. And in those countries, those actions had actually led to GMO bans or GMO labeling laws. So it didn't make that difference here. Nothing. It really made no difference except that those 30-some-odd tests didn't happen afterward. As it turns out, there have been no more atmospheric releases of GMO bacteria anywhere on the planet since then. It seems that no one is developing products for market that require releasing GMO bacteria. So it really had a huge impact, our little action. Even though we never expected that. So, let's see. Starhawk. Starhawk was in one of those three groups. I'll tell you. So the second test site sabotage, I did go out with that group. But what happened was, AGS had taken the plants the first time and just put them back in the ground. And even though, they're not viable test plants anymore, they just wanted to be the first to do this thing. And so they sprayed their stuff anyway. And by the way, I'm not particularly scared about Frostban. I wasn't particularly freaked out about it. I wasn't expecting it to necessarily do anything. I was just being precautious. The precautionary principle, which we need to pass again. So we were trying to figure out, how do we keep them from just sticking them back in the ground again? So that's when we got the idea that we'd have to do something that would mess up the soil. But we're earth firsters, so we're not going to destroy soil. We're not going to put poisons in the ground. And we never came up with a solution. And then one night, these four guys, friends of mine, showed up. One guy had a big fire extinguisher filled with ammonia. And then I guess they did have about 250 pounds of salt. And I guess they got the idea that, from the Bible or whatever, about salt messing soil. So they wouldn't wait for me anymore to figure out what would be the thing to do. And we didn't even know if it really would be effective. So they dragged me out there, and so 5 or 6 of us took care of the plants the second time. It was a bigger patch, and it was larger, about the same percentage, about 90% of the plants we pulled up. And a guy named Jeff, very tall guy, was running up and down the aisles of the plants, or the rows of the plants, with his fire extinguisher, just pumping it, and people were spreading salt and pulling up the plants. And we got back to town, and then that morning, I guess we were staying up late, that's when we had to figure out, well, we got to send a press release out, let them know, how are they going to know about the salt and the ammonia if we don't tell them? And that's when we came up with the idea about saying, since we didn't know if the salt and ammonia would work, and ammonia is like a fertilizer, I think, sometimes, or it's used in fertilizer and fertilizer bombs, I guess. Since we didn't know that would deter them from doing the test, we said, well, we've got to tell them we put a herbicide in there, and tell them it's slow acting because they're not going to see instant. We had to make them believe this lie that we were putting out there, so that they wouldn't do the spraying, because we really did want to stop that industry. And anyway, so that's why I said the thing about slow acting herbicide, blah blah blah. But that was not true. And I've gotten shit over the years for our saying that because, and I don't disagree really. Anything I said as an Earth Firster reflected on other Earth Firsters. And so if we put an herbicide in there, that would deter some of the purity of the image of Earth First.
Going forward with these kind of tests is similar to going forward with nuclear power when all you have are Geiger counters to measure the results. You promised us that Frostban would not escape from the Brentwood test site, yet it did. You persist in a cover-up of these results. We consider your actions acts of bacteriological warfare waged on an unwitting public, and we pledge to resist you tooth and nail. This is not a threat of violence against people.
Today, activist members of Earth First boasted of their latest sneak attack. Andy Caffrey read what he said was a communique that had been slipped under his door.
In the early hours of Monday, November 30th, beneath blinding spotlights, under the noses of 2 guards, and despite an 8-foot-high fence, we entered the test site. The strawberry plants were completely covered with 250 pounds of salt and a large fire extinguisher full of ammonia. In addition, an unidentified, slow-acting herbicide was randomly applied. People who did this, I presume, feel so strongly that this industry is just going to roll over communities, that we're going to have future Chernobyls and Bhopals, that they felt that at this point in time it's worth putting a small amount of an herbicide on land that's already had herbicides put on it. With the birth of this industry, there are absolutely no opportunities for the public to have its wishes upheld by the people perpetrating this. And because of that, people have to resort to these kinds of tactics.
But Jeremy Rifkin then talked to me, and he disagreed with what we did. He thought we shouldn't, I guess it was after the first test, had nothing to do with the salt or the ammonia or anything, but he thought we shouldn't have done the test site sabotage. And his argument was, because you did all the legitimate stuff, you know, we did the lawsuit and the petitions and all of that, and just because you lose, it looks like sour grapes if you resort to doing something like that. It makes you seem, I don't know, immature perhaps. I disagreed, and I still stand by it, and I think history has supported me. I felt that if you feel this, not feel, but if you know from knowing the science and how society works, that this is a bad thing that has to stop, like Kavanaugh is a bad thing that has to be stopped. You do what it takes short of harming people in a physical sense. I don't mind costing some rich person some of their money or causing some property damage. But you know, you're basically saying, oh, it's not really horrible if you lose? Really? So, you know, Kavanaugh gets in there and that makes it 2 sexual predators that the Republicans have appointed to the Supreme Court. That's okay? I mean, we have decades of liberals and progressives saying that's okay by their actions because they don't fucking raise hell. It turns out that what we had done had inspired people all over the world. And there's something like 70 countries that have GMO bans. I mean, for food, all kinds of stuff. So the resistance is really important. It is important. And a lot of resistance fights don't work. I have a lot of defeats in my 61 years. But this was a really great success in the long run. And there's a lot you can learn. I want to show you something. I do have a SoundCloud page where I have a talk I gave about this a couple years ago. So there are a lot of talks that I have. Let's see which of these buttons do I do. Yeah, here we go. There's going to be. Yeah. So this is my SoundCloud page. One of these guys, maybe 2 of them, were mindless thugs against genetic engineering. I'm not going to tell. So I have here, this is a bunch of Earth First music, Battle Cries from the North Rim. First solo recorded album. And some more Earth First music. Some other people did some warrior poetry. I'm going to do some poetry here. Oh yeah, I'll have to do some poems in a second. And where is that? A lot of cool stuff. Robert Hoyt. Robert Hoyt is the guy who sang Ohio. This is a whole concert that I recorded in 1995. Country Joe and the Fish did a benefit gig for me when David Gypsy Chain was killed by a logger who felled a tree on him. There's a David Rovix concert I put on. Where is this thing? Can't be this far down, can it? I hope you're enjoying this. I'm going to play some music next and then wrap it up. Well, anyway, if you look down here, you'll see a talk I gave. It's very clear that it's a GMO one. Okay, so get rid of that. Get back to me. So let's see, it's 9:19. We've been doing it for over 2 hours. I'm just going to play this music and wrap up again. If you can and help me out with my activist expenses, go to this paypal.me for Andy Caffrey and make a little contribution there. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of the hearts. 405 hearts. Oh my God, and hundreds more other things. That's wonderful. Thank you all. Appreciate your encouragement there. So, yeah, I'll go over number 5. I'm going to vanish for a second, I think. There it is. Okay. And this is a Earth First Woodstock that I made called Welcome to the Rendezvous. At the end of an Earth First Rendezvous, we have a day-long concert, rabble-rousing speeches, and warrior poetry. So this is a sample that I put together. There's the first part of it. Okay, well, I'll have to play something else, but that's going to wrap it up for this show. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to do this often, on most days. Probably do a short thing in the morning, like between 10 and noon, and then in the afternoon into the evening. Maybe starting at 4:20, huh? Getting real about reality. I'm in recovery from MSNBC. Thank you for celebrating my birthday with me. Yeah, here we go.
We are the most important generation of human beings to ever walk this planet.
Earth First believes that the worldwide environmental crisis is so dire, they must shock the American public, industry, and even mainstream environmentalists with their words and actions.
If I knew I had a fatal disease, I would definitely do something like strap dynamite on myself and take out Glen Canyon Dam.